Israel's attacks on Iran sets off strikes and counter-strikes and sets not just the region but the world on edge over worries of a nuclear crisis. While the US and G7 back Israel, Russia and China come together on Iran's side with the SCO. With thousands of Indians in both countries, can India keep its West Asian balance, or does it have a moral responsibility to weigh in? Hello and welcome to Worldview at the Hindu with me, Suhasini Haider. This week, another blow to global stability and to the international order.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction.
تهدید تأثیر نمیگذاره در رفتار ملت ایران، در اندیشه ملت ایران. ثانیاً اینی که به ملت ایران بگن بیایید تسلیم بشید.
As both leaders there said, Israel launched a barrage of strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities on June the 13th. Natanz, Isfahan, Fordo, and more recently, Arak heavy water reactors, also killing several top nuclear scientists there. In a series of targeted strikes, Israel also assassinated top Iranian generals, including its most senior commander, General Shadmani, and IRGC's intelligence chief, General Kazemi. Prime Minister Netanyahu also didn't rule out targeting Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei. Iran's response came swiftly, much more purposefully than we've seen in the past, with ballistic missiles hitting Tel Aviv and Israeli military facilities and targets around the country. A hospital in Beersheba was also hit. Iran said it was only targeting military infrastructure and research facilities nearby. Israel vowed revenge. Iran also bombed the world-famous Weizmann Institute in Rehovot. Hundreds of civilians have died just within a week of those strikes. This is an estimate, but both countries have just shrugged that off as collateral damage. What did the international community do in this? The US initially said it hadn't been consulted, but it backed Israel completely. US President Donald Trump left the G summit in Canada a day early to deal with the crisis. Remember, he had also refused to sign on to a G7 statement until it was sharply critical of Iran, not Israel, in this crisis. But now Trump says he may take up to 2 weeks to decide whether the US will join the attack on Iran. In addition, Trump held talks over lunch with Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal General Asim Munir. This was much to New Delhi's disappointment, of course. Trump said he discussed the Iran-Israel war, but didn't give too many details of what the US is asking Pakistan support for. In the past, remember, Pakistan has provided the US with bases, logistical support, and intelligence sharing against Afghanistan. This may prove trickier in the Iran case.
I mean, did you talk about Iran? Did that come up? Is there anything you can share from that meeting?
Yeah, well, they know Iran very well, better than most. And they're not happy about anything. It's not that they're bad with Israel. They know them both, actually, but they probably, maybe they know Iran better. But they see what's going on, and he agreed with me. The reason I had him here, I wanted to thank him for not going into the war, just, ending the war. And I want to thank, as you know, Prime Minister Modi just left, just a little while ago, just left. And we're working a trade deal with India. We're working a trade deal with Pakistan.
Well, for the first time, at least there, Trump not claiming credit for the India-Pakistan ceasefire. Meanwhile, SCO countries, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization minus India, came out to condemn Israel's aggression, called its strikes a violation of international law. In a call between them, Putin and Xi demanded Israel stop all its strikes, indicating that they would back Iran if necessary. And the UN chief and the International Atomic Energy Agency sounded the alarm bells.
This development is deeply concerning. I have repeatedly stated that nuclear facilities must never be attacked, regardless of the context or circumstances, as it could harm both people and the environment. Such attacks have serious implications for nuclear safety, security, and safeguards, as well as regional and international peace and security.
The IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, there speaking just after the attacks. So where does India stand? As we have said before here on Worldview, for India in West Asia, there's the diplomatic position, there's India's military and connectivity interests, and as well as Indians in the region, nearly 10 million in all. So as the crisis escalated, the government, that had not announced any evacuation plan all week, began what it called Operation Sindhu to bring Indians wanting to escape the violence from Iran and Israel back. This got more difficult as not only are airspaces closed now, driving on the land route becomes dangerous. So what are the routes to bring people out from Iran? The embassy has asked all Indians to leave Tehran and other cities that may be targeted. Those close to the borders with Armenia and Turkmenistan are being facilitated by the Indian embassy to cross over and then to fly home. 110, in fact, students were flown by special Indigo flight from Yerevan this week. However, given India's tensions with Turkey and Azerbaijan after Operation Sindoor, the government is not so far suggesting that Indians cross their border crossings, which are also quite convenient.
And Iran is helping the Indian embassy in Tehran fly another 1,000 Indians on board 3 Iranian chartered planes from Mashhad to Delhi, opening Iranian airspace especially for them.
Then what about Israel? From Israel, your embassy originally told Indians don't move, stay where you are, but now it's advising them to take the road route out of the country. They can go over the Allenby King Hussein Bridge to Jordan or the Eilat Taba crossing to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt and then fly back. In addition, the Israeli government is considering chartering cruise liners to Haifa and Ashdod ports that can then take those fleeing out to Cyprus to fly back home. India's diplomatic position, if that is India's position when it comes to Indians caught in the crossfire, in fact, there have been a number of statements going out from the MEA. But when it comes to its diplomatic position on the statement, on the conflict itself, it has been equivocal and non-committal, trying to be even-handed with both. The Ministry of External Affairs said on June 13th in the statement that 1, India is deeply concerned, 2, that India is monitoring the situation, especially with the nuclear sites, 3, that India calls for dialogue and diplomacy, even offered to help in any way, including in talks to de-escalate the situation. But more importantly, India disassociated with an SCO statement that criticized Israel and chose also last week, so it was just timing, to abstain on a UN General Assembly resolution that called for a ceasefire in Gaza. India was part of a very small minority. I think more than 4/5 of the General Assembly voted in favor of that resolution. Entire G7 minus the US, entire SCO, BRICS, South Asia voted for it. And there was a lot of criticism for India internally as well, as only 6 months ago the government had decided to support calls for a ceasefire at the UN there. So given this situation, what explains the Modi government's position in particular? Because obviously this doesn't take any kind of a moral position on Israel's strikes on Iran's nuclear installations, the fact that Israel called them preemptive, but they were in fact unilateral, nor does India, if it does choose to align more with Israel, nor does it criticize Iran's retaliation that targets civilian areas in Israel. So in a sense, no condemnation or criticism of either. What does explain this? First, India's traditional tightrope balance may be tilting just a bit. It is clear that the Modi government certainly doesn't criticize any of Israel's actions, given the statements issued and abstentions on UN resolutions on a number of recent issues. Take a look at some of them. Israel's bombardment of Gaza in retaliation for October 7th attacks in 2023. Nearly 60,000 Palestinians have died, and India has mostly chosen to abstain and once in a while to vote yes. Earlier strikes last year on Iran that killed the Hamas leader Sinwar, also Israeli strikes on the Iranian embassy in Damascus that killed IRGC officials and at other places, Israel's bombardment of Lebanon, the pager bombing of Hezbollah leaders, including areas where Indian soldiers were amongst the UN peacekeepers that Israel was bombing. Also in the regime change in Syria, where India-friendly Assad regime was ousted, India said nothing about Israeli strikes there. Secondly, with the US and allies on one side and Russia and China on the other, India finds it easier to furrow just a less controversial, separate path from all of them, not joining Western statements condemning Iran or SCO statements and otherwise condemning Israel. All eyes, of course, will be on Prime Minister Modi's visit to Brazil. That's in early July next month for the BRICS summit and what might be said over there. Because remember, BRICS will include not only Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa, India, but also new entrants, which include Iran and UAE and Saudi Arabia. Third, India has much at stake with Israel. More than 20,000 laborers more recently have gone, students, and there are about 10,000 Indians in Iran. I think about 5,500 of them are religious students and about 2,000 more non-religious MBBS students there. Fourth, Israel is now the linchpin for the suspended IMEC corridor plan to Europe. And of course, India has said this is a very important corridor project for India going all the way across the Middle East and Israel to Europe. Meanwhile, Iran for the Chabahar port and the INSTC plan for India to be able to go around Pakistan for its connectivity to Central Asia all the way to Russia. Fifth, during Operation Sindoor, Israel backed India's actions fully, but New Delhi also accepted a visit from Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, indicating the importance of both. Israel has no ties with Pakistan, but Iran, as a neighbor to Pakistan, is an equally strategically important ally. So what's Worldview's take? India's predicament in the Israel-Iran conflict grows more acute with each escalation. Having no position is not an option given the close ties and interests with both countries and with the global groupings that they are a part of. However, while concepts of non-alignment and strategic autonomy can explain some parts of India's equivocal position on Israel and Iran, issues like nuclear safety, humanitarian crises, civilian casualties are not something a moral power with global aspirations can afford. There's much more. My colleagues at The Hindu, Stanley Joseph, Kalol Bhattacharjee, Alicia Datta have all written about the current crisis. But let me get you some books as well, some reading recommendations. There's, of course, Original Sin, Israel, Palestine, and the Revenge of Old West Asia. This is by Stanley Johnny, and it takes you through all of these areas we're speaking about. It's really a must-read now. There's another book called Target Tehran by Yona Jeremy Bob and Ilan Eviatar. I just started it. I can't tell you too much about it. And this book as well, which I haven't read but has been roundly recommended, called Beneath the Red Line, Iran, Israel, and the Rise of a New Lethal Front by Fazal Chaudhry. There's also West Asia at War by Talmiz Ahmed, the diplomat. I've spoken about this before. And A Treacherous Alliance, The Secret Dealings of Israel, Iran, and the United States by Trita Parsi. It was written in 2020, but after the JCPOA had actually been cancelled, and is a very interesting read. So we hope you keep up to date with all this reading and join us again here on Worldview from the team. Thanks for watching.